like Broken Tea and Pirates Cove, like the fun things tourists could do when they come to Englewood. So just thinking through all of those things and how we can play a role in promoting all the good work we're doing in the city. So like I said, mostly this year we're focused on training our team and creating documentation and really getting that stability ironed out so that when in future years we can really put some clear numbers to that kind of stuff. One way we're doing that, we're working with the IT team to create a Power BI dashboard so that our data will be visible to you all anytime you want to see it. That is not available right now. We're working really hard to get all of our data sources. We have probably 24 data sources that we're pulling information from each month to put statistics together for our library board. So we really want that to be easier and to be more transparent for people to see what we're actually doing and how that's showing up in our statistics. So this year we picked very high level performance indicators for our work. We really want to make sure we are reaching out to Englewood residents to become members of our library. So far this year, we have signed up over 400 new Englewood cardholders. So we're very excited about that. We're just a quarter in, and almost 1,000 new cardholders total. So it's really exciting that we can expand our access to the library to so many people. That physical circulation, we're still going to be working on that as long as we can buy books and get them cataloged. I think our digital circulation is probably going to see big improvements this year. I'd say like we see here, early success, we are thrilled to see already our average of visitors is 200 people a day, and that's double what we averaged in 2025. So we feel really good about that. People are finding us, people are coming to the library, and they're enjoying what they're doing in the library. So that feels really good. Next week is National Library Week, so if you want to celebrate with us, that would be awesome. If you don't have a library card, that'd be a great week to stop by. We would love to see each and every one of you in the library. We're going to be doing fun stuff with our staff to celebrate a little bit. We have a potluck going all week, a gratitude station, and then we're happy houring with the team on Friday. So very excited to celebrate the team and library joy for this National Library Week. And we'll end with a really fun one. Summer reading is coming up. Unearth a Story is our theme, and we're really leaning into the dinosaurs of it all. It starts May 28th, and it goes till August 16th. Children can sign up and adults. So that's another opportunity to engage with the library if you wish. We would love to see you all sign up for summer reading. And that is the end of my presentation.
Director Fewell, thank you very much for the presentation. Are there any questions from members of council? Ms. Fewell, were you? I'll start off with a question. So I know that just because it wasn't really touched on here, but in terms of the staffing levels today, are they adequate, or is there still a need potentially in the future to increase the staffing within the library itself?
Thank you for that question, Mayor Sierra. I think we're experimenting with something this summer. We have seen enormous growth in our summer reading program, for example. So we just hired and I think have offers out to 2 people to be part-time seasonal employees for us in this summer. So what we're really trying to do is track that time and those activities that those folks are doing to see if we need a full-time person, if we need a part-time person, or if we're going to be doing well to have a few, just more flexibility with some part-time seasonal. So I think we may be back depending on the continued growth of our programs. We are outgrowing our storytime room. That's packed every day. So we move a lot of programs into this space. So yeah, we'll definitely keep you updated and keep good data on what we would need and why we would need that.
Sounds great. I appreciate that. Member Prang?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. It was really thorough, and I feel like I know where we're heading in library services. One, I just wanted to commend you on having the November week of national recognition of hunger and homelessness. I think that that's an important thing for the library to highlight in partnership with all of the services that we provide. So thank you for that. I am curious about learning more about the implementation workshops that you did as part of the process for the strategic plan.
Thank you for the question, Member Prang.
Mm-hmm.
We had a couple of sessions with our partner who we contracted with, Barry Dunn, who did our library strategic plan. Those meetings were with our leadership team to kind of talk through what we were aiming for in terms of our goals, what we would start to try to measure and understand about our work, and then how we would be able to kind of infuse that into our operational work. So we took, I think, 2 different sessions with our consultant to do that work. And then now it's just in the hands of our library leadership team. And that's how we're implementing all of this work. As I mentioned, I think we have a lot of bigger, more mature work, I think, to do with our strategic plan in upcoming years. We really need this year to be foundational and help everyone understand roles and responsibilities, kind of what our goals are and how we're going to be acting to get to those goals. So yeah, they were a couple sessions just to get us started, and then now it's like we're off and running.
Okay, I appreciate that answer. I was curious because we're in the process of getting ready to finalize our strategic plan, and I think it's an interesting strategy to use as you're wading through a strategic plan, so I appreciate that information. My other question is on how are visitors per day tracked? If that's going to be a key performance indicator, I want to make sure that that's something that's easy to do and we can successfully report out on that.
Excellent question, Member Prang. I was thinking about today how we should be testing that, because we've been talking about wanting to make sure it's really accurate. We have just a door counter at each of our entrances that counts. It's an infrared sensor that counts as you in and out. So we
Okay.
get the full number, and we have to divide it by 2 because we know you've come in and you've gone out.
Right.
So
Okay.
it's counting all day. We do have to do a little tiny bit of manipulation to get that number.
Got it. That makes sense to me. I was just hoping that it was not a person trying to pay
Not
attention
clicking.
to that. And then lastly, I just have a comment to offer. I think that we've done a lot of good work and there's great language in the strategic plan referencing inclusivity. So I just have an ask that when we see strategic plans that include words like that our photographs are representative of that. I'm not sure that I see that entirely in the pictures that we included in the strategic plan, and I want to make sure that because it is a hub of the community, that we're demonstrating all kinds of different people with different looks, and that we truly are inclusive in that way as well. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Member Prang. Member Bethel.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Really appreciate you being here tonight. And I wanted to commend you in the work that you're doing in the library. I think it's especially important as we look forward as a city, especially that our library is one of the last free places to exist in Englewood. As we kind of start to look at how we're going to tackle affordability. I really like what the library is doing and all the work that you're putting towards the programming. A question for you, what do you feel like is the biggest challenge that you've come across over the past year? Is there a specific roadblock that stands out to you?
Thank you, Member Bethel. I'm thinking about this. My wheels are turning a little bit. I think the library's had significant challenges, I think, in the recent past. And I think it's tough for people to see the library in a different light after they've seen it in a struggling time. And so I think that's a big challenge, and I think a challenge before all of us. How do we help our community understand that the library is a welcoming, inclusive space for everyone in our community? And I think that's the support we need, and the work we're doing to make the place that space for everyone. So that's been the hardest challenge for me. But it's also been great to be able to sing the praises of the library and our amazing staff and the really great programs we're doing. So I feel really proud, and I'm happy to take on that challenge.
That's a great answer, thank you. In a less serious note, if there was, like, hypothetically speaking here, if money wasn't an issue and there's one resource that you could add to our library, what would that be?
Yeah, I think it's space. Thank you for the question again. We would, yeah, really like more space. I think a huge, I think we want this room for our programs. That would be the first ask.
That seems pretty reasonable.
Any further questions for members of council? I don't see any. Oh, so go ahead, Member Russell.
So speaking of space, you use this room occasionally?
Yes, we use this room.
Okay. So, I mean, because I think I've seen activities going on in here and I assumed it was the library. And it's mostly for children or some adults?
Typically, we book this room for our larger programs, which are our programs for children and families. So sometimes we see up to 200 people in this room for prom, for example. We'll have preschool prom in a few weeks. It'll be a great, joyous event. But I think the complexity with this room is that there's a lot of setup for these kind of meetings, and then we would need it for a lot of setup for those kind of fun and messy sometimes meetings.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for your question.
Well, Ms. Fewell and Ms. Watson, I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you very much for the presentation. And thank you very much for everything that you've done for the library over the past year or two in terms of what you have accomplished. It's definitely become a welcoming space, and I frequent it often, so I just appreciate everything that you're doing with the library, so thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity tonight.
Of course. Thank you. All right, moving on to the second item, we have our planning manager, Bryan Isham, and senior planner, Will Charles, here to discuss residential non-conforming uses and associate amendments to Title 16. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening. Aha, there we go. All right. Tonight we are going to be talking about residential non-conforming uses. This came up kind of at the end of the commercial non-conforming uses discussion that we've been having over the past year or so. Primarily to do with some of the reconstruction of non-conforming uses and things of that nature. So just to kind of reiterate what these are. So non-conforming uses are properties where through no fault of their own became a use that's no longer allowed in their zone district. So for these, it's primarily things like duplexes and triplexes in single-family zone districts, occasionally like an apartment, things of that nature in those residential zones. All right. So the two main ones that we've heard about coming up from constituents as examples are one is an R1 property that currently holds a duplex, wanting to demolish the structure and then reconstruct a new duplex. Under the current code, this would be prohibited. And then additionally, another one where a duplex in a single family zone district burned down and then also was not able to be reconstructed. Sorry, this clicker is a little sluggish tonight. So just getting into kind of what the code says right now. So for limited expansions, so these are if you had a duplex or, like I said, a triplex and you wanted to do an addition off of it. Basically, the way the code works today is it says, whatever is allowed as an expansion of a structure for a conforming use, you can do that. So if it's a 5-foot side setback on each side for a single family house, that duplex can build up to that same 5-foot side setback like the single family structure can. And then when it comes to reconstruction, this one is a little more stringent than those expansions. So for reconstructions, it has basically the 60% valuation in there. So if the structure is demolished or falls into disrepair or burns down, things of that nature, where 60% of the value is lost on the property, you need to then come into conformance with your use. So if you had a multi-unit structure in a single family, you would need to go to that single family use whenever you rebuild the structure. There are a couple of exceptions to that. So the first being for single family detached houses that have non-conforming setbacks. You can rebuild on your same footprint. So basically, you know, if it gets burned down, you can rebuild on your same foundation is kind of the goal on that. The second one is multi-unit residential buildings that don't meet the lot area required for the number of units. So this one is less on those R1 and R2 districts, but more on the MUR districts where there's a certain lot size requirement per number of units. So on those ones, it basically, you kind of ignore that portion and you can build up to that, you know, density quantity that you had before. All right. So as far as these, there are approximately about 200 properties that have a registered legal non-conforming use status for a residential property in a residential zone district. Of those 200, through the changes that were made during Code Next, those limited expansions, basically only about 55 of them still have a status where if something was to happen to that property today, they likely could not rebuild to their current density. So for those, you can kind of see it on this slide. You know, a lot of them are in those R1 districts where they, you know, have probably about 1 unit too many for what would be allowed. But they kind of go through all the other districts as well. So there's about 200 of them, but only about 55 of them have this kind of restriction as far as reconstruction goes. Aha, there we go. All right. All right. Okay. So for these, the way the code is structured today after the changes that were made during Code Next, the expansions are very flexible. So basically, anything that you can do on a conforming use, you can do on these properties. Meanwhile, on the demolition and destruction side, these more or less stayed the same as what they were in the prior code. So basically, if you lose 60% of the value, you have to go to a conforming use. So we wanted to bring up these two options if there was interest in adding flexibility to the code for these reconstructions. The first one being, you know, if the structure is burned down or demolished, that you could rebuild to what the current condition is. So basically matching that footprint of that existing structure. This is pretty similar to what was proposed during the commercial non-conforming uses for those structures as well. So maybe give like a year turnaround to, apply for building permits, and you can rebuild up to that same density amount in this case, and up to that same footprint. The second option is, is more flexible, but that would be to allow for basically those damaged or demolished structures to be rebuilt up to the same, lot size and setback allowances that are allowed by the base zone district. So if you had a duplex in an R1 district, you would follow those R1 setbacks and standards. So those are kind of the two options if there was interest in adding flexibility to this section. And then one thing that we also wanted to kind of just make sure is that you're aware of on these. There are, so right now we're kind of talking about the residential zone districts and those nonconformities. But there are a number of residential properties in the industrial and mixed use districts. So while the ones in these R districts are more, they have a higher density than what is allowed on those properties, these industrial and MU districts pretty much across the board ban these types of developments from happening today. So these would be like a single family house on Broadway, and also there's some kind of by Ironworks Village and the Winslow Crane PUD and that area of town. So we want to kind of make you aware that, whenever we're talking about these, are these properties that you also want to give these allowances to, or would these be ones that are better suited to kind of stay the way it is currently, where, if these were to be demolished, they would have to become a conforming use. So we wanted to bring that up too. But with that is the end of the presentation. So are there any discussion or questions?
Mr. Charles, thank you very much for the presentation. Any questions for members of council? Go ahead, Member Bethel.
So you mentioned that in the event of a fire or damage, one of these proposals would allow for the structure to be rebuilt to its previous condition. I assume that in this case, in the case you've outlined, this would be like an act of God type fire or accident rather than if a homeowner committed arson or something along those lines.
Yeah, and that's why kind of in here I put the word damage rather than specifically calling out like like an act of God situation, because the one thing you don't want to do is encourage arson. So for a lot of these, whatever you kind of do for a damage of a property, you probably should do for a demolition of a property. Same thing for like a property falling into disrepair where maybe it's rotted out to where you're going to have to do substantial improvements to the property, kind of all in that same wheelhouse.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Any other questions from council? Go ahead, Member Prang.
Thank you. In the section that references limited expansion is allowed if it preserves building patterns that is not detrimental to adjacent property. I don't know where exactly I read that, and it might have been in the memo.
It's the second bullet in limited expansions.
There we go. Thank you. How is this determined, and is the adjacent property owner consulted before the determination?
So these would be administrative, so there wouldn't be any sort of public outreach on if someone wanted to expand these structures. I can say as far as this section has been, interpreted, this is kind of similar to what the variance language is. So it's, like creating unnecessary nuisances on neighboring properties. I would think it'd be pretty hard to have something where it would be an expansion to these structures that would fall into that, just because you're not doing anything that's not allowed on the neighboring property as well.
Okay. I think that is helpful to my question mark on that. In general, I like the more flexible option under what you've presented today. I struggle a bit with not allowing, so say something does burn down and needs to be rebuilt, or someone just wants to scrape and rebuild. I feel like short of allowing that flexibility, then we have kind of a double standard. We've got some non-conforming uses, and we've expanded flexibility through the changes in Code Next. And so they can build on what's there, but then if someone has an unfortunate event or just wants to provide a better living space through rebuilding something that we wouldn't, it just seems like a double standard. And I feel like if a non-conforming use exists already, then it's kind of part of the fabric of that neighborhood and the use of that space, et cetera, et cetera. And so I don't know why we wouldn't want to continue to allow that flexibility. And also, if for instance, there was a duplex and we're saying you can't build a duplex again, then we're essentially saying we're going to prohibit, us having more housing stock that currently exists. And so I really like the idea of allowing the flexibility on this particular piece. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
And I would just say, as far as, kind of when we were thinking about these two options, I think, the first one is kind of a safety blanket for, those accidental destructions of property, right? So that kind of covers you if something happens, so you can keep that same density. The second one, though, does allow for demolitions and things like that, where you can, rebuild that property to a bigger degree. So that's kind of the difference, or the kind of thinking between those two options. But I appreciate it.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, so just trying to understand the two options here. Option one would be, I mean, if a duplex that's in, in an R1 zone is totally destroyed, they would have, under option one, they would have to rebuild on the same footprint, or
Correct.
you couldn't change, do you have to have like the same floor? Are you just rebuilding exactly what was there? Or is there some?
Right. And so that kind of goes, basically, you would, so if you had like a 1,000 square foot structure, you would rebuild that same 1,000 square foot structure.
Okay. All right. So, but you couldn't, if it was 1,000 square foot single story, you couldn't rebuild 1,000 square foot, but have two levels.
Right. And then it would fall back into those limited expansions.
Okay.
But you would keep that existing, existing structure that you just rebuilt, and then you could do that expansion as well.
Okay.
So-
And then on option two, you're allowed to build it back to the pre-damage density. So say it was a lot with, an R1C that had a triplex on it. You're saying under option two, they would be allowed to build a triplex on that, but expand it so they're larger units. And then the restrictions on that are the development standards for R1C in terms of setback and bulk plane and everything, not what you would build in R2.
Correct.
Okay. Good. Yeah, my preference would be option two.
Thank you very much, Mayor Pro Tem. I'll come back to that in a second. So, Will, I got a question. I'm just kind of curious just because of the two pictures shown there. Are they pictured for a specific reason, or is it just stock photos in a sense?
Bryan, you put those in there.
No, those are just, you'll see in this slide and the next slide, they're just pictures that we used of
Okay.
duplexes or multi-unit developments that, I mean, to me, they blend into the neighborhood. You can't tell the difference if you're just driving down the street. So that's kind of where we're trying to show is they're already there. They're already existing in all these neighborhoods. We don't get complaints on these things' existence very often, no more than we would get it on the existence of a single family home. So we don't disagree with you. This might have been kind of a miss for Code Next that we probably should have captured, but we didn't. The next slide, those are more representative of the dichotomy of this whole conversation of a non-conforming use in the residential districts means something that's allowed a little bit above what would normally be allowed. But in these non-residential uses, these single-family homes would never be allowed to be constructed today. And so their existence is a little bit different in that we do get complaints from these single-family homeowners that live in industrial areas that complain about the industrial uses, about noise, about odors, things like that. So that's where we're kind of asking this question of, does it go for everything, or do we only split it the way we did non-conforming commercial into just the non-conforming uses and the residential districts, and then we look at maybe non-conforming residential uses and commercial districts a little bit differently, because those are really expected to get more dense rather than kind of stay as is.
So in the second picture, it's the opposite. It's residential. Is it residentially zoned areas?
So the picture on the left is South Broadway. So you have businesses that are pulled all the way up to the property line that are very much what you would see on South Broadway and very much fit with our design standards, right next to a single family home.
Right.
And the picture on the right is actually in one of our industrial districts, where you have a lot of industrial uses that are legally conforming uses, right? That are developed, but that are next to single family homes, and those things kind of cause some issues.
Okay. Sounds good. So if we go back to the previous page, so option two then, so if we're talking about an R1 district, I'm just trying to figure out, are we more permissive of what can be in terms of the setbacks and the bulk plane within an R1 district than we are in an R2 district?
I believe it's a little bit more restrictive. I want to say it's like 12 feet in one of them and then 15 feet in the R2s. So the bulk plane is a little bit more restrictive in the R1 districts. I'm not sure if the R1C is on that cutoff or not. R1C might be in the 15. I can't quite remember.
Okay. Yeah, because I guess my concern with option 2 would be that it would, if if a home was damaged beyond repair, or the homeowner would prefer to just upsize that home, I'm hoping it doesn't take away from the character, and I guess that's my question. If the R1, if it was more restrictive than the R2, that would be what I would be going for. I would want to, I'd rather there be a more restrictive, we'd be more restricted in that regard. If we're not able to do something that you can rebuild up to like a 20% increase from what the previous footprint was or something like that. That would be my preference, where we would just do something just percentage-wise, potentially, of what the old footprint was.
Yeah, I would say the one kind of issue with doing that is, so the way it's structured right now is with these limited expansions, right? That's currently in the code, is that you can expand up to those, whatever that district says, So beyond everything besides density, you treat it like you're in that zone district,
Okay.
legally conforming, right? And so, if you rebuild these things, you could still then utilize those limited expansions to expand the structure up to the same density quantities. So it just, that's kind of those, like I said, like the reason why we had that option 1 and option 2 is option 1 is that really just a safety blanket for if your house burns down, you can rebuild it. Option 2 is probably the more logistical one where, it's gone. So you can now rebuild to whatever, you would have been allowed to do.
Right. I guess that whatever is what concerns me on that one.
Yeah.
So that would, okay, so that makes sense. And then if we go back to the chart, I'm just trying to figure out the R2s. What falls under the R2s in terms of non-conforming? I think it was 2 back. There we go. What would those be? So it's saying too many primary units. So let's say the too many primary units triplex in R2A.
So R2A only allows for single family and then duplexes.
Okay. So it is a triplex.
So a triplex would be 1 too many units, and then the quadplex would be 2 too many units.
Okay. So then in our discussion then around, I know I was talking about R1 previously. So if we were to move forward with the change with option 2 on that one, then we would still allow those triplexes and quadplexes to go in, if we were to move forward with option 2 with the non-conforming use. Do I have that correct?
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
As far as the way that's written, if that's a line in the sand that you guys would prefer, that's also an option. But yeah, as written, that would be for all of these R1 and R2 districts, allowing the reconstruction.
Okay. Are those older builds or are they newer? The ones in R2, the 5.
Not sure if
Do we know the years of those?
Are you asking if they're older
Yeah.
projects?
Yeah.
Yeah, so any of these projects would have to have predated the zoning that's in their area, otherwise they would never have been allowed. So a lot of these things are probably before the city adopted any zoning policies in the 40s, or before we started annexing in the 50s and 60s
Right.
to get bigger. So the majority of these have existed either longer than they've been in Englewood or before Englewood had any kind of zoning.
Okay.
Otherwise, they would never have been allowed.
Okay. No, that sounds good. I'm not sure who had their lights on first, if it was Mayor Pro Tem or Member Bethel. Oh, well, we'll go actually Member Russell and then Member Bethel and then Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. I'd like to go back to the picture where the houses are in the industrial areas. So that house, if something happened to that house, then it got damaged beyond repair, could it go into the current, could they turn it into a business or industry? I don't know what that business is next door.
Sorry, are you asking if the house was damaged, if it could turn into a residence, or?
Right, could they they rebuild as a business.
Correct. They could build a business on that structure if it was damaged beyond repair.
Because that's what it's zoned for.
Correct.
Now, if the house was damaged and they wanted to rebuild the house there, they would have to build it on the current footprint?
So as the code says today, if that house was to burn down, it would not be able to come back as a residence. It would have to come back as a use that's allowed in the industrial district.
Okay. Okay, and so the next picture to the right, is that the same thing? Those two houses happen to be built in an industrial area?
Yeah, so the left one is, I believe is MU B2, so on Broadway, and then the right one is industrial. So either, I think probably I-1 with that area.
So where is that picture of?
Do you know, Bryan?
I think, I don't know specifically. I want to say it's either Lottie or Fox Street. So north of us, where the Sequel apartments are, just to the east of there,
Okay,
there's about 2 blocks of industrial. It's zoned industrial, but it's kind of this mix of industrial uses and some single family. And then one more block to the north, on that one's on Alati. The other one is Fox and Galapago. There's these kind of weird mixes of older single family and newer industrial uses.
okay, so for some reason those houses were scraped or whatever, it would have to be built industrial also?
The way the code is written today, yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Member Bethel?
Yeah, I was just going to comment. A lot of home insurance policies are pretty stringent in what they pay the actual construction value of a house if it were to be destroyed. And I'm trying to empathize. Like, let's say my home burned down and I'm trying to reconstruct. I'm probably going to choose the most efficient model to rebuild my home, right? Because the insurance policy isn't going to give me a huge amount of money. And the cheapest way to build a house is not to recreate a very specific floor plan, right? If you're constrained by the specific shape that you're trying to rebuild, it's going to be more expensive than buying some kind of modular or prefabricated, which can be very attractive these days, home. So if we had some wiggle room and say, like, you know, plus or minus 500 square feet or 800 square feet, whatever that kind of looks like, I think it would uphold the spirit of saying we don't want to maximize property boundaries, you know, build to the edge of the sidewalk, or really go against what the character of the neighborhood was or the character of the original structure was, but still having the spirit of saying, you know, let's let you rebuild in an efficient way and become whole again.
Thank you, Member Bethel. Mayor Pro Tem.
A couple things. Back to these are industrial or MU. One of them's MU, right? It doesn't MU allow residential?
Not a single family.
Yeah.
Not saying, oh,
No, it allows things like mixed use, or with Code Next, we gave the option of building like multi-unit houses, like duplex, triplexes, townhome kind of development, as long as you met certain other standards, so certain MU3C standards, but single family would not be allowed at all in the MUB 1 and 2 districts or the M1 and 2 districts.
okay. So that doesn't make sense to me. I think if a duplex is allowed, a single family, single family should be allowed. So I'd prefer to fix that by just allowing single family homes anywhere in the mixed use areas. But I can, I could certainly get behind, a more limited exception to just allow it if that's not, not something council is interested. My general thinking on residential is if residential is allowed at all, the less dense options should also be allowed. And then with regards to industrial, I would kind of have the same thing there. I mean, industrial, this is one where I'd want the market to decide if there's any property in industrial that becomes available. I don't see a reason not to just allow some level of residential development there as well, because we know there's a lot of market, maybe market demand for that. So I'm just looking at this going, why don't we just let the market, decide in both of these cases and just allow the residential development of both types. And then the other one was back to the residential zone districts. I think the argument I would make for just allowing, if it's already a duplex, to allow it be a duplex however they want to rebuild it, is that I mean if they're allowed already in an R1 district to build a huge single family home, then why would it hurt if they build a huge duplex if there's already a duplex there? I just don't see why you would limit the size when because a single family home would be allowed to be that large. Then you should allow it for a duplex when it comes time to rebuild. So I'd go for the more permissive option there as well.
Thank you very much, Mayor Pro Tem. Any further questions? If not, I think wasn't counting the preference of each individual council member. So, Mayor Pro Tem, did you weigh in? I believe you did weigh in. You preferred option B, correct?
Mine was option
Option
two.
two,
I mean,
yeah.
I would even go more permissive than that, but that's
Yeah.
If I could ask one more question.
Sure.
Just whenever you're kind of giving us your answers on it. The one other thing we wanted to bring up is, so right now for some of these, there's basically like a year to rebuild kind of caveat in there. So that way, if something burns down, you don't have like a decade and then you come back and say, I want to now do this. Is that something you want us to add in for these, where there's like a year to apply for building permits for these, or some sort of time limit on it? Or is it something where you want us to leave it open-ended? So when you kind of give us the other answers, if you could do that one as well.
Go ahead, Member Bethel.
Yeah, again, thinking hypothetically here, arson investigations and fires can take so long to clean up that I think a year would be too quick to require those permits to be filed. But I would certainly say 10 years is too much. Maybe 3 to 5 years would seem reasonable.
Thank you, Member Bethel. Mayor Pro Tem.
I would say 5 years.
I didn't want to go that long. I'm not sure how long a investigation would take. I thought 1 year was too short, but I was thinking 2 years. I just don't want the lot to sit for an extended period of time, because we get complaints about that as well in residential areas where there has been a demolition and it just sits vacant. So my preference would not be for them to sit idly. So I'm thinking 2 years. If I'm off in terms of my understanding of how long an investigation may take on a fire, then I would be open to the 3 years, but I just don't want it to sit vacant for very long. Go ahead, Member Russell.
Thank you. So, can the Board of Adjustment and Appeals decide if we set a date, like let's say we set 2 years, and somebody couldn't get it done in 2 years, could the Board of Adjustment and Appeals decide to give them more time?
Only if you gave them that allowance. So if the allowance doesn't exist right now, so they wouldn't be able to hear that kind of a case. But I think if the allowance were created, we'd have to confer with city attorney's office, but maybe.
Yeah, rather than saying 2 years, 3 years, or 5 years, you could write it as a discretionary thing where it's 3 years, but up to discretion of the Board of Adjustment and Appeals if it needs to be extended. But you'd have to put it into code.
Okay, I appreciate that. The only thing that I would like to give maybe at least 3 years, but depending on where the economy's at the time it happens, that could impact someone's ability to rebuild also. So.
Thank you very much, Member Russell. Okay. So I'm thinking at least 3 years is what I heard, 3 to 5, in terms of that. So we stay in that time range, or that time range, I think we would be okay. In terms of my preference, I would be in favor of option 2 in this analysis. And let me go back to the next one. So in terms of the I1 or MUB2, I don't want to really open it to the market here, so I'd be happy to allow them to rebuild within those zone districts as well, but not really just open up to every possible option. So just allowing them to rebuild would be fine with me. Member Pring, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I will, on the last slide, stay with option 2. I do think at least 3 years allowance for the rebuild. I just think there are all kinds of circumstances that impact people. And if we want to say that we're encouraging people to stay here and to be able to build and do what they need to do on their properties, you know, with the guardrails that we put in place, that we should allow for that. So I would be a fan of at least the 3 years, if not more. And then on the other, the residential places in the commercial areas, I'd lean more toward option 1 kind of standard.
Go ahead, Member Russell.
Thank you. And I would lean towards option 2 also on that one. And 3 to 5 years would be okay. In the, now I have one other question, like in the industrial area, once it, or even the MU2 also, once it goes to what belongs in that district, it could never revert back. Is that correct?
Correct. So if you remove the nonconformity status from a property, it can't go back to it.
Okay. Okay. I appreciate that also. So I don't know where I wanted to weigh in on that, though. All right, thank you.
All right, I think, is there anything left, Mr. Charles? Did you get enough input from us, direction?
No, I think that all makes sense. Appreciate it.
Well, Mr. Charles, thank you very much for the presentation and answering our questions. Do we know when this may be coming back? Next step, I'm assuming it probably has to go back to P&Z, or is this something that comes back to council? Bryan, what's the next steps here?
I think that depends on your direction. We need to go back to P&Z no matter what to talk to them about it. But we could come back with a study session with some code amendments, or if council wanted to, I know that we have the non-conforming commercial use stuff coming up, hopefully pretty soon. Right. So we could maybe pair this to go with that. So since they're both in non-conformities, or we can bring this after non-conforming commercial. It really depends on the direction of council.
Thanks for that, Bryan. So my preference would be to not bundle the two together. One, because we may have diverging opinions about the commercial versus residential. That would be one. Two, regarding commercial, and I'm just thinking of one specific business. I know that we're looking at 13 businesses that are affected by this potentially, but at least one business, it's summertime and they cater to a summertime crowd. So in order for them to leverage those changes, I think it would be prudent for us to get it in front of us as soon as possible. In terms of the original question, I think coming back to us with code amendments makes sense. But I'm assuming planning and zoning has to see it before there's final sign off, right? So.
Yeah, so we would take it to them for a study session to talk about amendments, then back to you all to show you what the amendments would look like to get your buy-in again. And then it would go through the typical Title 16 amendment process. So P&Z public hearing, finding of fact, council public hearing, then council first and second reading.
So you're saying that code amendments would go first to planning and zoning?
Yes.
Is that the normal process, or?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Well, I was gonna ask for something different, but no. If that's the normal process, let's continue with the normal process
It's
then.
normal and required process.
Well, there you go. Well, then even better, even more reason to stick to that process. Do members of council disagree with anything that I stated there in terms of the process? Okay. All right, I think we're good then. Thank you, Mr. Charles and Mr. Isham for the presentation. And with that, everyone, let's take a 10-minute break at 7 o'clock. If we could be back at 7:10 and get to the last item of the evening. Thank you. All right, everyone, we are now back. Moving on to agenda item 4 for the evening. We have our Director of Finance, Kevin Ingles. We have members of the leadership team, as well as members from Planning and Zoning and some of our other commissions and committees, here to present the preliminary review of the 2027-2031 5-year capital needs list and alternate financing discussion. Good evening, Kevin.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Kevin Ingles, Director of Finance, and you mentioned all the other staff we have available for your questions. So we're going to talk just briefly about the process, and then we're going to go through the various departments and funds that have capital requests for 2027. All right, so here's the budget calendar. We see we're on the second bullet there under Q2. The next time you'll see us will be on May 26th. We'll have departments preliminary operating and capital requests at that time. That the capital request will be basically the list you see tonight, unless you decide to make changes or we have anything else that comes up between now and then. These are just the various steps. I won't go through all of those. I think you've probably all seen these. Here are the various boards and commissions that have some input into the budget process. These are either dictated by charter or municipal code. Here are the departments and the various funds that they're in charge of and that could and usually do have some capital requests. So you'll hear from these departments tonight. We categorize our capital requests into two main categories, either projects or programs. Projects are typically more one-time items, and programs are ongoing. Often that's to maintain something that was previously a project. And then you'll also hear us talk about discretionary and non-discretionary funding. Tonight, for 2027, we're only requesting funding for non-discretionary items. We don't think we have funding to dip into the discretionary funding, but of course, that's always council's prerogative. So first up, we're going to start with Parks, Recreation, Library, and Golf.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Christina Underhill, Director of Parks, Rec, Library, and Golf, and I'm here to talk about the Conservation Trust Fund, Open Space Fund, and the Golf Course Fund. The Conservation Trust Fund is funded by our lottery dollars, so if you don't win, your money comes to parks and trails, which is great, so thank you for playing the lottery. These are the non-discretionary items that we have identified for 2027 to 2031. Pirates Cove maintenance, yes, we are doing some improvements through the bond, but we still have aging equipment there, so replacing things like the boilers, hair and lint strainers, motors, things like that. That's where those fundings come from. The Bellevue train, it's not the train itself, it's more or less the tracks. For the train, we do inspect them and repair them, the ties and the rails annually, so the train functions properly. And then the ERC and Mali fitness equipment. This year, we're actually doing more work over at Mali, and next year we plan to do some fitness equipment upgrades over at ERC. We don't really have any new programs per se, but we do have this funding allocated for the various areas through Pirates Cove, Mali, ERC, different park improvements. Typically, we use that for grant funding matches, and Bellevue Farm. Next is our Open Space Fund. This is a fund that we receive from Arapahoe County Open Space, and we get a 1/4 cent sales tax from the voters. That's an indefinite tax that we'll get year after year, and that helps with a handful of things. One, our maintenance program, which pays for 2 full-time staff and 2 part-time staff. We utilize the funds for that. And then also, we've been very successful with the Arapahoe County Open Space grants, but we also use this funding from Arapahoe County for grant matching as well to do improvements to our parks. And then this is just the discretionary list that we utilize annually for different programs we have in our parks. So we use it as we need it. And then our golf course funds. Again, the Broken Tee Golf Course is a enterprise fund, so all revenue they receive, they put back into their facility. Right now, we are leasing golf carts, and so this funding goes towards our golf carts. And as far as the discretionary list is concerned, we're doing a major project at Broken Tee currently, and whatever funding we have left, we address annually through this fund, whether it be new equipment, new amendments for the soil, asphalt around the club, the golf course, as well as the paths around the golf course. We try to address those regularly as well. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Director Underhill. And I guess I should have mentioned earlier that any members of our board or commissions, if you want to ask any questions as well, just come on up to one of these seats and you can ask the question. But any questions for members of council? Go ahead, Member Pring.
Thank you. Just one quick question. I noticed that the irrigation systems is listed as discretionary. Given the amount of money that we're investing in our parks, I just have a question as to whether that should be non-discretionary versus discretionary.
That's a good question. Thank you for that. Ultimately, we are utilizing the bond funding for our parks, irrigation. This funding here is the one-off challenges we may have. A pump goes down that we haven't been able to replace just yet. It'll come out of this fund here. So ultimately, irrigation systems, while they might be brand new, may have challenges that we'll want to make sure get fixed, especially in our drought conditions.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate that we have bond funds to pay for the irrigation. I think moving forward, I would love to see more consideration of shifting that over, just so that we do have ongoing funding or more of a demand for ongoing funding for those one-off situations or just better overall maintenance. I mean, part of our ask within the bond was addressing years and years worth of neglect to some of those systems. So just wanting to protect the investment that we just made. So that would be my only comment.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any further questions from members of council? Mayor Pro Tem, I can't see if your light's on or not, but it's not. Okay. There we go. All right. Thank you very much, Director.
Thanks.
Okay, moving on. Now we're going to talk about the Public Improvement Fund and the Capital Projects Fund. These two funds are the primary funding sources for general government capital projects. So we'll have multiple departments on this. There we go. So as we mentioned before, and I was talking more about these two funds than the other funds you'll hear for some enterprise funds. They have discretionary funding, but for the general governmental funding, we're only proposing non-discretionary items for this year. We have about $8 million worth of requests. That includes the budget supplemental you just approved for the Public Improvement Fund and then new requests for 2027. In a typical year, we have about $4.5 million worth of revenue that is dedicated for these type of capital projects. And there you see we're not anticipating requesting anything from the general fund to supplement the capital for this year. And we have had preliminary discussions with the EDDA about adding some funding for those two projects there, the Old Hampton Complete Streets and Little Dry Creek Plaza. So if all of this works out as it's listed there, we're still about 600,000 short. So staff will be working on that between now and when we come back in May. That's those same numbers, just broken down a little bit different. And then you can see that 621,000 at the bottom there. All right, so here are the individual projects listed by department. So we're going to start with the city manager's office, and these are facilities projects. I believe we have our facilities manager online.
Are they able to speak, or are we having an issue with the mic?
Hey, can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry, it looks like I wasn't able to control mute and I was just given permission. So the three facilities, non-discretionary funds that we have lined up is the Civic Center parking garage, which is requesting the 1.7, the Civic Center passenger elevator update, and then the Civic Center community room fire curtain. When we met in February, there was inquiries about the RTD contract in regards to the Civic Center parking garage. And ultimately, after reviewing that, it would appear that we have about 310 spaces that we owe to RTD per the contract that is existing currently. So I guess I was hoping to discuss a little bit today about what council was thinking in terms of that inquiry, whether you all were considering of possibly just not doing the repairs and shutting down the garage fully, or if the inquiry was more related to the phasing of the garage in a temporary repair condition. But yeah, we can get to that when you're ready. And then the Civic Center passenger elevator update, ultimately, council had suggested that we break this into 3 phases instead of having the 300,000 upfront. So that should be a feasible method. And then the Civic Center community room fire curtain, there was further exploration done and we ran into some electrical issues. So as of right now, we're basically still investigating and hoping to get some electricians out to dial that in and then unroll the fire curtain, hopefully here in the next month.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hong. Are we asking questions after each of these, Kevin, or what's the?
I think it might
method?
work best if we do it in between departments. So yeah, now I think would be good. if we
Any
have
questions or
on this.
comments from members of council on those first 3 items? Go ahead, Member Russell.
So, meaning the first 3 items in the non-discretionary
Correct.
capital.
It'd be the Civic Center, parking garage, elevator, and fire curtain.
So currently, we're budgeting 1.7 million for the Civic Center parking garage.
that's-
And why is the $100,000 in red for the elevator?
I apologize. I should have mentioned that. The items in red are the differences between this presentation and the one in February.
Okay.
So it was 300,000 in
It
February,
was
but
300 for 3 elevators, and we've narrowed that to 1 per year.
Okay, so there's 3 different elevators
Correct.
in the parking garage?
No, not
No,
in the
this
parking
is-
garage. Sorry, go ahead.
This is in the Civic Center.
correct.
There are 3 passenger elevators in the Civic Center.
Okay, all right. Thank you. That answers my questions.
Member Bethel.
I'm trying to remember how much we allocated for the Malley Center mural. I think it was like $15,000. Does anyone have that number on the top of their heads?
It's somewhere around there. It's about,
It would seem like if our fire curtain is down in this room, rather than just having a gray sheet imposing on us here, it could be a great opportunity to showcase a local artist. And if we wanted to allocate $15,000 to paint something on that, it might make it a little bit less bleak.
Are you suggesting painting on the fire curtain?
Yeah, is that a terrible idea?
And I don't think that that's a feasible idea, given that the paint is going to change the chemistry essentially of the fire curtain wall, which is going to make it more flammable, which defeats the purpose of the fire curtain. So I would have to do further technical investigation there, but my gut feel is that it's probably not feasible.
I appreciate that knowledge. Thank you for informing me.
so real quick, so City Manager Lewis, just remind me, do we allocate $1 million for the parking garage in 2026?
Yes, we did.
So we allocated 1 million for 26. For 27, we're looking at another 1.7 million. So that puts us at 2.7 million. I guess, Ms. Hong, to answer your question about what our plan is with the garage, I would need to understand whether or not it is feasible for us to close off the garage if we decided not to do the 1.7 million. Like, are there any safety challenges that any additional liability that we're taking on for not having the parking garage, whether or not we have enough parking for our employees, for anyone that is visiting the library, like understanding what that impact would be to anyone that attends or just visits Civic Center. I would need to understand that. The
Right.
1.7 million, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ms. Hong.
Yeah, so essentially, if RTD is owed 300 parking spaces approximately, there's a limitation on the displacement of that parking space. It's around 1,300 lineal feet in distance from the RTD station. The city also owns, several other parking areas located across Inca behind Qdoba, that retail strip. And that parking area is approximately 200 parking spaces. So we're still short the 300 that we owe just per contract with RTD. So if we were to close the parking garage and not make it accessible to anyone, both the upper level and the lower level, we're going to be shy 100 parking spaces per RTD's contract, just relative to how that contract's written. And then with consideration towards the patrons of the court and the library, if those 200 parking spaces across Inca are allocated to RTD, our patrons to those court and library technically won't really have any other space to park in other than the metered and the timed spaces at the circle and maybe down the street, this Englewood Parkway along the retail area. So parking would become very limited without the garage, and possibly that's a promotion for the use of RTD. But just from a car transportation parking standpoint, it's very limiting.
Yeah, Ms. Hong, I think you're pushing me in a direction that tells me that we need to do this 1.7. But did you not take into account the parking spaces north of Floyd? Isn't that RTD parking as well? Do those count towards that number?
Those count towards that number. The total number is like 940 or something like that. And the 600 parking spaces in the north are allocated to specifically just RTD.
All right.
So in total, it's 900 something. And then it's like 310 in the parking garage and 600 in the north parking.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Hong. I think I'll let other members of council speak. I'll go Member Prang and then back to Member Russell.
I believe Member Russell had her light on first.
Go ahead, Member Russell.
Thank you. I would just like to weigh in. I think the problem is going to be not closing the garage underneath. The garage up above and all the cars parking up there will create the problem also, because that's why we have to shore it up to maintain the weight on the upper level.
It would be incredibly tricky to close the lower level or close the upper level, only one and not the other, just from the coordination and the risk standpoint, I think. If we were to close down the garage, I would recommend we did both levels.
Yeah, I agree with that assessment. So thank you, Member Russell. Member Prang?
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question about the duration of the contract with RTD. When does that contract end? And is there any potential to buy out that requirement?
Yes, you have an analysis coming from City Attorney's Office on the RTD issue specifically. So what Young's talking about is there's 910 shared spaces under a permanent transit easement that we're required to keep available to RTD. So it's not reserved specifically for RTD, but under that permanent transit easement between the north lot, there is 605, and then in the garage, there's 305. And so at any point, RTD could agree to amend that. And we actually think that they have reason to amend that. They don't use those spaces. It just comes down to having that conversation with RTD. And we've had it in the past, and they've not been accepting of our offer to change or our request to lower our requirement for shared spaces. But we're working on how to address that problem.
How long ago did we have that conversation?
A couple of years ago.
Okay. How long would the, so if we could get them to the table to have that conversation again and make another request, what does that process look like? Like, how long would the process take to do that?
They could amend it, like as soon as they agreed to amend it, we could do it the next day. The process in terms of making that argument to RTD, I don't know how long that would take.
Right.
The steps in us committing to city center redevelopment have been big in showing RTD that we have other uses ready for that space. And so that's one reason RTD was hesitant to lower the space allotment was we don't own outright that north lot, we lease it, so at any point it could go away. So if we removed those 305 spaces from the garage, in RTD's mind, those spaces in the north lot could go away tomorrow. So for us, the difference in position is that we have a partner now with City Center Redevelopment, and we have a plan for how we would use those spaces, and less of a parking dense plan and more of a walkability, transit-oriented development space.
Okay.
So it's not a direct answer.
No, it's a very helpful answer. I think if we could get follow-up as to the timeline of getting something in front of RTD where we want to move in that direction, that would be helpful information to council. Thank you.
Any further questions for members of council? Or any boards or commissions? Anybody have any additional questions? Actually, I have one other question, and Sean, I'm not sure if this is a question for you or if this is a question for Ms. Hong, but when was the last time we got an estimate for this number, the 1.7? I'm assuming it was pretty recent. This came up about last year, so.
Yeah, I'll take that. Yeah, I'll take that question if Sean doesn't mind.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So the 1.7 is a portion of the total 2.4 that was being estimated by Martin back in January of 2025. And that 2.4 is just their priority or severe repair items.
Okay.
There's also a slew of other repair items that's considered intermediary and lower priority, but we haven't really gotten to that portion of the discussion.
Thank you for that, Ms. Hong. Okay. Any further questions for members of council? All right. Ms. Hong, thank you very much for those 3 items.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Okay, the next department is information technology. And there aren't any changes from the February meeting, but if you have questions, we've got staff available.
So this is on the infrastructure development and the department PC replacement. So the department PC replacement is just X amount of PCs that need to be updated because it's been 3 to 5 years or whatever the correct.
That's right. Yeah. Happy to answer any questions on that, but essentially it's the replacement of workstations for the city.
All right. And the infrastructure development, can you speak a little bit on that one?
Infrastructure development is for aging end of life switches, anything that connects to the network that builds the infrastructure for the city as a whole. Multiple departments are in this scope. The scope started, we started our development in 2023, so we're on our 2nd year now.
Okay. Thank you so much. Any questions on this? All right. I don't see any questions from council nor from members of our boards. All right. I think pretty self-explanatory. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
All right, next up is the police department, and they do have a couple of changes from the February presentation.
Sounds great. Good evening, Chief.
Good evening. How are you all this evening? The two changes that we had when we purchased the body and dashboard cameras, one of the options that we had discussed and tried to get was the real-time translation feature. Frankly, I just overlooked it in the contract, and it was not included when we started receiving them, so we've had to go back to them to request that feature, which is about $100,000.
All right. Any questions for members of council? Go ahead, Member Prang. I see you reaching.
Thank you. I don't have a question on that piece, but can you describe to us how the taser equipment replacement is listed as an ongoing program?
Yes. The beginning of this year, Taser has stopped making the model that we use. And so we were just informed that they were no longer going to offer the model that we use, which necessitated us buying, actually, not all new Tasers. I think we buy 90 altogether. That's going to be prorated out over the next 5 years. But in order to get all of patrol up to speed, that's 57 in the first year, which is going to be the biggest chunk of that.
Okay. I think that makes sense to me. So the 312 is across the 5 years
It goes down.
eventually
the
after the
first is
initial
57.
purchase.
We'll buy, I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, no, that.
Yeah, we buy 57 the first year,
Okay.
and then it goes down significantly, 90 altogether.
Okay, thank you.
Member Russell?
Thank you. So on the police and dash camera system, the 464,000, is it just increased 100,000 from the previous?
It's about 360,000 a year this next year in order to get that other software put on there, the translation and a policy guide is going to be encumbered in the first year, and then it'll go back to the 360 after that.
Okay, so it was 360 before we added the other piece on it?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And I apologize. That was an oversight on my part.
No problem.
Go ahead, Member Bethel.
This might be optimistic, but does Axon offer any bundle discounts if we were to change from our flock contract?
I don't want to speak for them right now. That is certainly something that we would definitely inquire. It certainly seems like a reasonable option, and I think they do, but I don't want to. I would qualify that first because I haven't done it yet.
It just seems like a great point for negotiation on something that, we want to support this program. It is, of course, expensive, but they are, tools that we need, so.
I agree.
So Chief, one other question on this. So is the technology obsolete, or is it obsolete because of the package that we're upgrading to?
I'm sorry, for the dash cams or the taser?
I thought it was the dash cams that you spoke of that item. So
it's not obsolete. It was something that we had discussed going through the sales and purchasing process. Okay. And frankly, it just wasn't included in the contract when we previously put it to paper, and it was an oversight on my part. That's why I didn't make it on.
Okay.
It's not obsolete. It just wasn't included in the contract.
Okay, so what is going end of life then, Chief?
I'm sorry?
You mentioned something was going end of life.
I'm sorry, that was for the tasers.
Okay.
The tasers, the model that we currently carry are no longer,
okay.
They're not being produced anymore.
All right. Any further questions from council? Anything from our boards? All right. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
All right, next we have one request for Parks, Recreation, Library, and Golf.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Christine Underhill, Director of Parks, Rec, Library, and Golf. Ultimately, we've requested $560,000 for the construction for Phase 2, we'll call it, at Little Dry Creek Plaza. There are discussions happening with the EDDA related to these improvements and pending their board as well as council approval. They may have 1.4 to offer in 2027 to complete the construction. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you very much. And I was just made aware by Tim that Noah Kaplan has his hand up for a question. I'm assuming it's probably for the preview for the chief. But before we get to Noah, any questions from members of council on this one item? And just to be clear, Christina, the DDA is going to be listening to this item at the end of the month, right? During this month's
Correct,
DDA
yes.
meeting. Okay. Go ahead, Member Russell.
Thank you. So for this $560,000, what are we doing?
That's a great question. So this year, we're investing $600,000 that was approved already in the capital budget, and the EDDA is also investing $600,000. We're working through construction drawings currently, the design for that. The hope is we'll be able to go under construction at the end of this year by investing that $1.2 million-ish towards the construction. And so it may be done in 2 phases. There's a lot of questions still based off of the design and going out to bid and getting a contractor out there to do the work. So the 560 would be the city's portion for this project, but ultimately if EDDA can fund it, the total project cost would be 2.6 million total for all construction at Little Dry Creek Plaza, and that's what we're designing to.
Okay, does it have to do with where we were going to change things when they were going to do Hampton? And so now, because that project got canceled, we're going to fix that park kind of all the way up from Broadway down to, is that where we're talking about?
That's correct. Yeah, the Upper Plaza area that you can see from the street, and then from Hampton, you can see down into Little Dry Creek Plaza area. So
Okay.
all that's going to be renovated, so it's more of a destination than it sits currently today.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, any further questions on this item? Mr. Kaplan, can you hear me? Are you able to speak? I'm not sure if your question is for Christina. Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, yes, my question was for Chief Jackson.
All right, Chief, are you able to come back up? All right, Mr. Kaplan, you can ask your question.
So my question was why these particular expenses are considered non-discretionary. So we're in a situation where we're only looking at non-discretionary expenses across all of these budget categories. It sounds like these are, at least some of them are expenses that are sort of additional to what we already have. We're adding capabilities. That sounds to me like discretionary spending. So I'm curious why in this particular situation, these are considered non-discretionary.
Yeah, I'll start with can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
I'll start with the dash and body worn cameras. Those are state mandated, and that's why those are non-discretionary. The second is the tasers. I think I would just put them in the category of best practices. I think most law enforcement agencies offer their officers a non-lethal way to resolve physical conflict. And I think for our officer safety and for our citizen safety, I think it's a generally accepted law enforcement practice of a less lethal capability.
And I'll just add to that, this is City Manager Sean Lewis. The tasers also, a member of command staff, when we discussed this as a leadership team, also mentioned that they will be out of warranty next year.
I'm sorry, yes.
So we do have tasers now, but they will no longer be serviceable or under warranty next year to function as they were designed to do, but I definitely asked that same question.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to say thank you for the question. It's a fair question.
Is the real-time translation service, I mean, that expense, it sounds like, is additional to what we already have. So yes, body-worn cameras, dash cams are state mandated. Real-time translation is not. Is that non-discretionary?
So it's a fair question. I'll say translation is necessary. So we pay for a translation service right now. Recently, one of our deputy chief was doing a ride along, and the officer walked up to the car, and the person was not English speaking, and the officer took out his phone to use the translation app that we currently have, which frankly is not best practices to have things in your hand and to have your attention diverted. This is something that allows the translation to take place and the officer to still be able to be vigilant, and it increases safety. So we currently use a translation system. This is just simply incorporated into the camera system itself.
Any further questions, Mr. Kaplan?
No further question. I'm not sure that I agree that that makes it non-discretionary, but that's a larger question for other folks to think about.
Yeah, I appreciate the question, Mr. Kaplan. Anyone else online, Tim? All right, I think we're good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chief. Were there any further questions for Director Underhill? No, go ahead, Chief, sorry.
Okay, our last department is Public Works. They have the last 5 projects. Again, no changes from the February meeting, but we do have Public Works Director Rachel here for answer or questions.
Sorry, you're waiting on me. Director Rachel, is there anything that you want to add regarding these 5 items? These seem to be the items that we see year after year, so anything to add here?
Yeah, good evening, Mayor and Council. Victor Rachel, Director of Public Works. Thank you for the question. It's noted in the detail on these items that I would say they're scalable, but they are critical to our programs and services that we provide in the community.
Okay. Thank you very much, Director. Mr. Haggerty, you could take Jack's. No, I'm joking.
Well, thank you all for having us, the board members here and the commissions that are here. We are over our allocated budget of, I think, 4.7 million. I forget what the exact number is. So I think one of the things that I hope that we're going to be discussing after this is where are we going to make these cuts? I mean, Victor, I appreciate the note that maybe some of those have a little bit of flexibility, but I think that's the struggle that the Planning and Zoning Commission obviously had coming in here is, we had these non-discretionary requests that are over our budget that were allowed. So I think those will be the next steps. I just want to confirm that that's what we're going to be doing at this point is how are we going to get this down into a budget that we can then present back to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Haggerty. I think it's a great point. I'll ask the question again in terms of the parking garage estimate was done a little bit over a year and a half ago, it sounds like, or actually a little bit over a year ago. When do we get more concrete numbers for this? Are we going to get this at the time of the actual budget passing in August, or will there be a refresh of these numbers, I guess, I would ask in terms of the estimate for some of the items?
Yeah, we'll be working on these depending on direction from council this evening before we come back in the end of May.
Okay. The other question on those 5 items, Director Rachel, the signal equipment upgrade and replace. Do we have an idea of which signals would be replaced?
We do, and we are advancing a refresh as well. So we do structural testing, and we are kicking off our structural testing this year to identify any significant concerns in addition to what we've already got listed. In the previous analysis, we also have 2 poles that have been requested to be modified and or replaced as part of an ADA accommodation. So those are also currently in progress. To Director Ingles' comment, as we work through that, we'll be able to sharpen that number as well. 400,000 would effectively allow us to replace 2 poles in the city.
Okay.
There's usually additional infrastructure that has to go with that. We have to do bores under the road, replace wiring, and potentially secure easements depending on the location. Some of our intersections are very tight and the right-of-way is not available. Of course, we're always looking for opportunities to design and keep everything in the existing public right-of-way so we don't encroach on private property, residential or commercial.
Okay. And Director, if we were to ask for a decrease in any of those 5 items, where would you see those dollars coming from if we were to prioritize them?
Good question. The concrete utility share may be an area where we could decrease slightly. Those funds are matching funds to repair not only concrete in front of city facilities, but also if it's a corner lot. Per city code, the city has an obligation to cover part of that if the property is inside the concrete utility. So there could be a little bit of an opportunity there. As we look at the conditions of our roads, the road and bridge materials, we've reduced that a little bit this year from last year. Again, it would be not significant per se, but there could be a small opportunity there to reduce. I would be hesitant to do a lot of change in pavement maintenance by area. Of course, it's council's discretion. The direction we've received in the past is that's a top priority, is maintaining our roads. That line 1 there, 375,000, is in addition to the tax dollars, but it allows us to approach our road maintenance and have that flexibility since tax dollars aren't fully known until the end of the year. And we get a last lump in with the holidays, which Director Ingles could speak to a little bit. Concrete accessible ramps, given the ADA transition plan in place, I would, between that one, line 5 and line 1 would be the 2 I would be most hesitant to impact, as well as line 4.
Thank you, Director Rochelle. I would agree with the payment maintenance by area. That would be one area that I do prioritize. The simple fact that we went to our citizens to ask for a tax increase in order to improve our roads, to me, it wouldn't make any sense for us to then decrease the supplement to that as well. So, Mr. Haggerty, was there something else you wanted to add?
Yeah, I guess along those lines, maybe away from all of the public works ones. The Little Dry Creek Plaza is, I think, one I'm personally, very excited about. I think it'd be a really benefit for the city, but is that money required this year? It sounds like that was going to be maybe a 2-year funding cycle. Could we delay some of the funding there? Is that an option? Or if the EDDA is providing, do we have to do a match this year?
Thank you. That's a good question. Ultimately, there we go. Ultimately, so this funding's for next year. The funds that we have this year are set. And like I mentioned before, we could scale back the construction of Little Dry Creek Plaza if for some reason EDDA doesn't approve the full funding that they're expecting to for 2027.
Okay. Any questions from members of council? Anyone online, Tim? Thank you very much, Mr. Haggerty, for your questions. I got no further questions. Thank you very much, Christina. All right, Kevin, back to you.
Okay, this next slide is just a little bit of additional information on the public improvement and capital projects funds. I won't go through this. I think you've probably all seen all of this before. This slide is the same information. We've just added the discretionary column just for your reference. Again, we're not asking for any of that funding, but you can see there's pretty large numbers in the discretionary projects that list. Just one last opportunity for questions before we go into the other funds that have capital requests, if there's anything from what we've covered so far.
Anything that's missing, members of council, members of our boards? Go ahead, Member Russell.
Can I just ask a question? So discretionary funding, is that what P&Z and Budget Advisory Committee usually work on? Non-discretionary are things that are already in the works, kind of, we can't change it. And so the bottom line is, we spent almost all the money for discretionary funding, doing non-discretionary projects.
So this is the first year in many that we don't have discretionary funding available, or we don't think we do. That's obviously council's discretion, but, so yeah, it's a little bit different this year than it has been for a number of years.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right. Don't think I see any further questions. Thank you so much, Kevin. So on to the enterprise funds, I believe.
First
Or
up is the
different
police
ones, yeah.
department. They do have some bond money left in their police construction fund. There we go. I think the only request there is, ongoing request is for the flock safety cameras.
Any questions regarding this? Go ahead, Member Russell.
So can we use police building construction funding for flock cameras?
We can. The ballot measure said included police-related equipment and needs, I guess. So, yeah.
Okay, so it was, I forgot. So it was written in a way that we could
correct.
use
Yes.
it for that. Okay,
Yeah,
thank
we
you.
used most of it for the building, but we have used some for other items.
Okay, thank you.
Kevin, can you remind us again, is that because of the spread, or why do we still have funds available within that construction fund?
It is because of the financing mechanism that we used. There's still, well, it's on one, yeah. We still have about 600,000 after this year's spending. So we're just about out of that money now.
Okay. Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
The flock cameras saw annual expenses. Is that for just the maintenance of the contract, or is that adding more cameras?
I'm glad you asked, and I just wanted to be clear, and that's one of the reasons why I walked over. This is only for the trailer camera that we put in certain places.
Okay.
This is just for that. This is not for the license plate readers, just to clarify that point.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much for that clarification, Chief. All right. Any further questions? Go ahead, Member Bethel.
This trailer cam, is that speed enforcement camera?
No, it's
just a safety.
That's exactly right.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Kaplan, you have a question?
Yeah, my question on this one was if the bond allows us to use it for police-related equipment, if the expenses that we talked about earlier for things like tasers and dash cams could be paid for out of this fund to make money available for other needs out of the other fund.
The answer is yes.
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Kaplan. Any other questions? All right, Police Chief, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, next up we have Public Works, and they have the Concrete Utility Fund, the Service Center, and the Capital Equipment Replacement Funds.
Sorry, 1 second here, trying to get the slides.
You're going to have to point it
advance.
backwards, apparently.
Okay, there's the secret. Thank you. So first up, the Concrete Utility Fund. So this is the fund we use to make repairs primarily in advance of mill and overlay, as well as fixing concrete challenges within the community, whether that's heaved sidewalk or curb and gutter that's been busted that needs to be repaired. So our request for next year is a little over $1 million for sidewalk and curb and gutter repair. Then you see that consistently progress up through 2031. Any questions on concrete utility before we jump to the next one?
Thank you, Director Rochelle. Go ahead, Member Prang.
Thank you. I just have a question on sidewalk repair in comparison to maintenance or pavement maintenance.
Okay.
This is significantly higher, and I'm just trying to understand the disparity in the price tag of those two items. And then I also have been wondering, as I've driven on some of our roads that have had the lead service lines replaced, they're pretty bumpy. And
Sure.
where we've done the boring or whatever the process is. And so where does that come into play as far as ongoing funding needs as well?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So the Public Works team is continuing to coordinate with the utilities team on the lead service replacement. When we look at the ratings of our roadways, we use that to inform which roadways we're going to do per zone. We currently go zone by zone. That's not to say we don't go out of that, but that's our standard program as we try and stay within those zones. The idea with concrete utility is to try and stay one zone ahead so that when the pavement comes, the concrete's ready to go curb and gutter. Now, this program does not include or have that funding source that pavement maintenance does. The budget for this year is, I believe, 2.2 in sales tax plus the PIF dollars to go with it, which is why you're not seeing quite apples to apples here for the concrete utility.
Okay, that makes sense to me. So with the ongoing rotation of pavement maintenance, will that be reassessed once we get closer to finishing up the lead service lines? I drove down Logan today and was shocked at how bumpy it felt driving down the road. And so, and I'm sure that's not the only street that has that condition. So will we revisit and potentially reprioritize specific areas if we find that the score on that particular roadway that's had recent disruptions is more significant?
Absolutely, yes. We actually completed a survey mid last year and reported to council. So we have that on a regular program, but we will be continuing to do that. We also keep track of where we have potholes and complaints and put that information into our evaluation when we're selecting roadways.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, can I add to that question?
Of course,
response?
go ahead.
Member Bryan, I have noticed those bumpy roads and have talked to Director Van Rye about the warranty on those patches. They are warranted. I can't remember the time frame that they are, but I think that there is a need now as we're beginning to wrap up on the downhill slide of lead service lines, to go back and check each one of those and see if they have settled to the point where we need to have additional work done on those. The other thing that I've talked to him about, and I believe Deputy Director Stone in the room tonight, is also the use of a diamond grinder that can smooth out the high spots. You may have seen some of this happening on Santa Fe going into Denver. From Englewood, it really smooths out that surface without getting down into the base. But I think both of those need to be looked at, and we will be asking the Utilities Department to look at that closely.
Okay, thank you for that information.
Member Russell.
Thank you. And this probably is maybe being taken care of this year. I turned in a council request, and this would probably be on the sidewalk in Old Hampton Complete Streets. Are those sidewalks going to be replaced? It would be the south side of Old Hampton, like from Grant to Logan.
Good question, Councilmember Russell. I will need to double check. The wider walk is on the north side. However, if there are areas that are damaged and need replacement, if they're not covered under the project, then we would do them out of the concrete utility annual project.
Okay. And I think I asked that it get done because there are people that walk to church that with a walker. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the comment.
Do you have something to add, Sean? No. Director Rochelle, The sidewalk repair by area, are they done by zones as well, similar to the pavement maintenance?
Yes, they generally are, but again, if we get a request or there's an issue that's out of step, we're not going to ignore that and not go address it just because it's not in the zone. So we do get requests from time to time. We will evaluate those, and if it's an urgent matter, we'll jump on it and get it taken care of.
Are those, is that line item also specific to walk and wheel, or is that a separate line item, walk and wheel?
Separate line item for walk and wheel, yeah.
All right, thank you so much. Any further questions for members of council or members of our boards? I think we are good. Thank you very much, Director.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, that's right. You got a couple more, don't
I got two more. So Service Center Fund, this is where our garage provides services to internal departments, vehicle maintenance. We are currently looking at, for the upgrades to the building, $100,000 in identified projects for 2027, and $260,000 in 2028, including the desire to master plan the site. If you've been to the service center, it's got multiple buildings that are aging, and we're continuing to maintain those, but I believe the site overall is in desperate need of a master planning effort, which would involve multiple departments, not just Public Works. Utilities is on the site, Parks is on the site, PD. So we have a lot of uses out there that are all operating. So it'd be a collaborative effort to master plan that site in 2028 and get it ready for future improvements.
All right, any questions on this line item? Just real quick, Director Rochelle, wasn't there like a $15 million capital request for Service Center a couple years back, or am I misremembering something?
I think you're correct. That might be before my time. There was an effort to do master planning with, well, I'll say the first round of city center redevelopment. And when that went away, so did the master planning and rebuild effort, which, Deputy Director Stone may be able to speak to it a little bit as well, which led utilities to invest in upgrading their current building to add meeting rooms and offices on the site.
Okay, so there's nothing hiding behind these numbers that we may have to take care of in the future?
Not at the moment. The plan, as I mentioned, in 2028, just to do the master plan, and then depending on the results of that, that would then inform future budget requests.
Okay. Thank you so much. Any questions from council? All right, nothing online. All right, last item.
Okay, the last one, SURF, the Capital Equipment Replacement Fund. So this is our fund that we use to replace vehicles and equipment that are within the program based on their useful life cycle and or replacement costs. So as we track vehicles that come in, once the cost of repairs exceed a certain value in combination with the age, we look to replace those vehicles and or equipment within the city to make sure that we're operating at a high efficiency. You can see in 2027, we have a little over 1.5 requested, and then a little bit over $1 million in 2028.
Any questions from council? All right, anything from members of the boards? Nope, I think we're good. All right.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Director.
Okay, our last group of funds is the utilities funds.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Sarah Stone, Deputy Director of Business Solution and Engineering for Utilities. If that did the trick. Good. Great. All right. I am here tonight to present our preliminary 2027 capital budget, as well as our preliminary 5-year capital improvement plan for the water, sewer, and stormwater funds. Each of these funds had a master plan update that we began in 2025, worked through 2025 to put together the numbers that you are seeing tonight. We presented presented similar numbers to the Water and Sewer Board at the March 10th meeting. So we take all of our budgetary items to the Water and Sewer Board and get their input before we bring it to council. So as an update to the master plan, we just wanted to provide a brief list of certain things that have gone on since the 2020 master plan when when the whole system was evaluated for water, sewer, and storm. For the source water conveyance, city ditch improvements has been the biggest project that is in progress now. I heard today, actually, in fact, that 3 out of the 4 reaches are now fully complete. Water is flowing through City Ditch through the rest of the summer, and that final reach, we have planned construction in the end of the year. Other improvements have been at the Union Avenue Pump Station. Was a Boreas ditch assessment and McClellan Pump Station evaluation. At the treatment plant, we've made quite a few improvements over the last 5 years. The solids handling project is up and running. That's removing solids from the South Reservoir. The Allen Water Treatment Plant condition assessment and process optimization has been an ongoing effort for the last 5 years. And then we are currently working on the finished water pump station alternative. So that's pumping water from the treatment plant into the distribution system. As you all know, we have been doing a lot of work in the distribution system, largely the lead service line replacement program. We are in our 2nd full year of construction. We anticipate that that program should complete by the end of this year. We have also started construction on the Denver Water Emergency Interconnect project. That is one of our most important projects that will connect our system to Denver Water. And should there be a catastrophic emergency, we would then be able to get water supplied through their distribution into ours. Additionally, we've made improvements at pump stations and evaluated the storage tanks, which are those overhead tanks that you see on the outskirts of the city. For sewer, largely our capital improvement plan follows the capital improvement requirements that we need to fund for South Platte Renew, but we have had additional investment into the sewer system over the last 5 years. It's really been evaluating the hydraulic model, seeing where there's maybe gaps in that collection system, and then again funding the capital plan for SPR. For the stormwater, there's been significant work as well. The upper South Englewood Basin improvements, the South Englewood Flood Reduction Project, those are the regional ponds, and that's a picture of that system there in the slide. We've also worked, we've mostly completed the Old Hampton Utilities project. Council saw last week another phase of that will begin this summer. There's been minor drainage improvements as well, and we continue to work with Mile High Flood District for partnership in smaller projects as well as these larger basins. And as Council saw last week, we have advanced Mile High Flood District's reimbursement for the South Englewood Flood Reduction Project of $8 million. So that will go to further investment into the stormwater system. This just gives you a snapshot, or I guess a view of how capital has grown over the last 5 years for this system, or each of these systems. The green is the sewer system that is largely South Platte Renew. The dark blue shows water. That's really the investment in the system over the last several years. A lot of that is funded through WIFIA and the SRF funds, or SRF loans, and the lead reduction project is the one that really has bumped up the capital investment in the water system in 2025 and 2026. So in updates to the 2020 master plan, this was the process we went through, reviewed projects that had been completed. We now have staffed operations and engineering through the last 5 years that have much more knowledge of the system. And so we use staff workshops to really document what improvements were needed moving forward. And so we're in that refinement piece before we fully publish a master plan update for each of these systems. So our 5-year summary for 2027 through 2031, these are total spend projections from the master plan. So for the water system, it's at another $45.9 million. Sewer system, 63.2. 58 million of that is our funding of SPR's capital plan. And then for the stormwater, it's estimated to be $10 million for the next 5 years. So given a comparison of where we were last year with our 5-year projection, you'll see 2027 and 2028, there's more specific numbers in that projected, and then it dropped down to $5 million. At the time, we felt that that was a sustainable capital investment for the water system over time. Our master plan updates are obviously showing that there's additional projects that are needed and will need to be programmed. So we will need to put this information into the financial model, because what's proposed now is this $45.9 million. In 2027 and 2028, I will mention that WIFIA, the WIFIA loan and the SRF loan will be used for a portion of these capital projects, and that's just due to timing. So there was a delay in getting projects up and running from maybe the initial plan of only spending $6 million for each of those years previously. For the sewer system, again, this is largely SPR. They went through a master plan update in 2025, so we've had those numbers and it stayed fairly consistent. There's been little movement other than they've actually reduced some capital or delayed capital in the 2030, 2031 timeframe, which allowed us to increase what we think is maybe needed for investment in the sewer collection system. If council recalls, there was a presentation where we provided information on sewer collection lines that were very close through properties, ran through properties, and in some case underneath homes. All of that needs to be corrected in the future, so we've programmed that in for the next 5 years. For the stormwater fund, the projected was roughly $4.9 million. You can see it's double that based on the preliminary results of the master plan for the stormwater system. A few key projects we'll go through for each of the systems. At the Allen Water Treatment Plant, all of these projects are funded through either SRF or the WIFIA fund, or actually, excuse me, a new SRF fund. There's the potential to do another loan through SRF that would allow for principal forgiveness. So that's that filter improvement project that would be eligible for some principal forgiveness. So we're working on evaluating a project for that. There's also flocculator replacement and additional improvements for the instrumentation at the Allen Water Treatment Plant. In the distribution system, that first project there that's in 2031 is quite a large project. This project would be redundancy for our Zone 2 pumps. There's pumps at the Allen Water Treatment Plant currently that do not necessarily have a backup, so that would be work in the distribution system in order to provide redundancy in the system. There's additional improvements at the Cornell and Pennsylvania pump station, and we've programmed in annual water line replacements through the next 5 years. Again, some of that is funded by the SRF, depending on how extensive lead line replacement is this year. We'll be able to use some of that loan to fund those projects. That last line item there is programmed to replace or to install meters for all non-metered accounts. About 10% of the system is still non-metered accounts in our flat rate. Water supply system projects, there's work to do at our pump stations that supply raw water at the Union Avenue pump station as well as McClellan. And then at Union Avenue, there's also a reservoir where dredging and a new aerator is needed. Solids are again produced there, and that a project is needed to clean that system out. The key projects and programs for sewer, replacing critical sewer mains and rehab and rehabilitation. Those are the programs that we've evaluated for the next 5 years. And then you'll see the large item is the SPR capital plan. That is Englewood's portion of their plan. For stormwater, there's both programs and projects that we've evaluated for the next 5 years. These are somewhat undefined until we get some results from additional modeling that our consultant has done, as well as the Mile High Flood District modeling. These projects listed here, we anticipate could be funded through our partnership with Mile High Flood District, where they would contribute 50% and we would contribute 50%. And again, there's some smaller rehabilitation and just small drainage area improvements. One of the things that we're evaluating again with Mile High Flood District is they do have funds available for maintenance and smaller projects. So we are hoping to partner with them to alleviate some of the stress on the stormwater fund and fund some of these smaller projects and maintenance moving forward. So this is the year-by-year capital cost with each of the enterprise funds. Again, the green is sewer and largely the SPR capital plan. The 2027 water shows a large drop-off. That is, again, as we complete those WIFIA projects that in the timing of that loan, we will see capital fall slightly, but we still do have some work to do when we plug all this into the financial model. As you recall, when we've shown the mountain graph, there are systematic issues in the 2030 timeframe for funding capital in the water fund moving forward. I think that's it. So I will open it up for questions.
Sarah, thank you so much. Go ahead, Member Russell.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much for the presentation. I do have a question. So does the outlook, like in the next 5 years, look like we're not hopefully going to have to increase the stormwater fee a lot, or we don't know the answer to that question
I
yet?
think the answer is we don't know yet. We have plugged these numbers in. We are also plugging in the $8 million reimbursement from Mile High Flood District. So we do need to make that determination of what of that $8 million can be assigned to these other projects and other needs. I know there's another phase to the Old Hampton Utilities project. It's the lining piece that that Director Van Ryn mentioned last week. So that will be coming at a future date where that would be funded through that $8 million. As of right now, we've pulled slightly less than $1 million from the sewer loan. So a portion of that does go back to the sewer fund when we've decided that the funds are available for what's coming up for capital.
Right. And so currently, are we still, like the water fund and the sewer fund go up 4.5% per year? Is that still in place?
That is still in place.
And is the stormwater fee, at one point it was 5% per year, is that still in place, or did we drop it off?
We have not dropped it off. We would anticipate the 4.5% to 5.5% increase continuing on. One of the issues that we do have with the stormwater fund is quite a bit of the fees that come in are assigned to the debt service. So the debt that was issued for the South Englewood flood reduction project, that does take up quite a bit of those fees year over year, leaving the stormwater fund for without any increase for ongoing capital investment at about $700,000 per year.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any further questions for members of council? Anything online, Tim? All right, Sarah, don't see any further questions.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Kevin, is there anything to add?
That was our last department. Unless you have any other suggestions or priorities that you want to pull out of discretionary, I think we have enough to work on the capital list before we come back in May.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything else I want to add based on what we saw this evening. Jack, is there anything? No, just straighten things out. No, I appreciate all the responses, the information within the packet itself. I did like some of the suggestions potentially of, I think specifically where Noah mentioned potentially using the police construction fund for the taser item. That may make sense. it's just an option that's available to us, I guess, I'm not sure whether or not it makes, that I will support it, but I think it does make sense to look at it based on some of the other items that we have to take care of. I don't think if there's anything else. I still just have heartburn about that 1.7 million for the garage itself. It does sound like it is a necessary spend, but it also worries me the other items that are not considered priority. Ms. Hong mentioned the fact that there's other intermediate items that are required at some point in the future. Understanding what that may be. Actually, Sean, if we can make that a council request, just understanding what those items are, what the time frame is to fix those as well, to just better understand what that final cost is going to be for the improvements on the garage. So just things like that is just things that's weighing on me in terms of this budget. All right. Anything else from members of council? All right. I think we're good. Kevin, staff, thank you very much for the input, and thank you very much to the boards and commissions for also attending as well and providing your input as well.
Thank you, council.
All right. With that, everyone, we are now moving on to reports from boards and commission liaisons. Anyone have anything for tonight? Go ahead, Member Prang.
Thank you, Mayor. Last week, we had the Parks and Rec Committee meeting. Bear with me while I find some of my notes. A lot of awesome updates going on. We had our meeting at the rec center and had some updates from the rec center and the aquatics staff from Pirates Cove. It sounds like they are currently already starting to fill the lower pool at Pirates Cove, so business is getting ready to be up and running, and obviously we're able to move ahead a little bit sooner this year given the weather. There was a report out that of the 40 private rental slots available, 39 are already booked. So Pirates Cove is really pumping and kicking this year as far as their availability of rentals, etc. There also is talk that shifting over to the farm at Bellevue Park, we had some updates on, potential design upgrades for the playground area there in our pursuit of some open space funds. That was very exciting, lots of cute designs, but a new idea that has come forward is the opening of the farm for adult night and a partnership with Western Sky to have some sort of adult-related activities at the farm. So that would be a new option within that park. Also, in the rec center, we had 68,000 people through the doors in the last quarter. So that just is an impressive number to me. Lots of traffic coming through. And then we also had some updates on our bond projects. And so it looks like the RFP for Pirates Cove was posted on March 31st. That should be proceeding quickly here. We're nearing the final completion of Emerson Park. Sidewalks are poured, irrigation is complete. We actually had a member of the boards and commission speak to the swing that was put in and how it really fits into the neighborhood and how the neighborhood kids use the space in Emerson Park. And so there was a lot of joy around that. And then also Rotolo Park, there was some delay in moving ahead with some of the projects there, just with some of the stormwater conversations, et cetera. But there has been a decision made to do phases of getting the park updates done. And so first up will be the installation of the bathroom I believe, on the east side of the park. I think that's going to be a nice improvement for not only the neighborhood users, but I also know that park is used often by some of our sports teams, et cetera. So that will be a lovely addition there. So just a lot of good stuff going on with Parks and Rec. I promised them that I would be a better reporter of all the good work that goes on through Parks and Rec. Then secondly, there was a committee meeting for the sugary beverage tax conversation on Friday. I was not able to attend that meeting, but I did review the notes. It does sound like for now, the initiative to kind of push through or gain support from city councils to run an ordinance for that tax has been put on pause. I think there's some hesitation, on kind of the political environment and implications, and just a desire for better education on the food hub itself and defining what that is for the Tri-Cities area. So, kind of taking a look and an analysis of the emergency food providers throughout the region. I think there's been a few areas that have had closures of those providers. And so just really being able to analyze and look at what's still available and where the gaps are, and kind of defining what that need is and informing the city councils on that piece of things before revisiting and pushing forward on the sugary beverage. I don't think that I've reported out since our first conversation, where I did learn that that is not, that the fee, or as many people would refer to it as a tax, is on the distributors, not on the end user as we would typically see it. So that is kind of a distinction in how that was being approached, but I do believe that we'll hear more about that eventually to come. But for now, that's on hold, and I hope that we will have some, maybe some public comment from that group to just talk about the need in general in the area and what the gaps are. That's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Member Prang. Anyone else for Council Liaison? No? All right, moving on to Council Members' Choice. I have 2 items for tonight. So one real quick, I wanted to follow up on 2 actually important items for people to listen into. First, I mentioned last week, I believe it was last week, that there's going to be another neighborhood meeting on the Dartmouth traffic circles. It's on May 5th. The location is going to be Charles Hay Library, and it's going to start at 4:30. It's going to go to 6:30. But I was asking staff if it was possible to do something within the neighborhood instead of having everybody come out here to this area. So we were able to get Charles Hay. With the weather unpredictability, the parks may not be the best idea. So we will be at Charles Hay Library May 5th from 4:30 to 6:30. The second item I wanted to bring up is that tomorrow we're going to have a water and sewer board meeting. As members of the public may be aware, we currently don't have a mandatory water restriction within the city of Englewood. It's something that's being discussed tomorrow night as part of the water and sewer board meeting. I guess I shouldn't say mandatory, we're having a discussion about it. And so that meeting starts at 5 p.m. tomorrow. I believe it may be the first item that's up for discussion. But I have been reaching out to Sean and members of staff about where we are with that, and so it's finally coming up in front of us. There were some things that needed to be worked out as part of our code in order to have water restrictions. Apparently, I thought we had water restrictions in the past, but they've always been optional. And so just wanted to make everyone aware that, yes, we're going to be discussing as part of Water and Sewer Board. After that, obviously, it comes back in front of council. So just wanted to make members of the public aware of that. If you want to attend the Water and Sewer Board meeting, it is in this exact room on the 2nd floor of the Civic Center building. As I mentioned, meeting starts at 5 o'clock, so it should be 5:05 or so that we get into that agenda item. So those are my 2 items. Anyone else for council members' choice? Member Prang, go ahead.
Thank you. I have lots to say tonight. So just, I wanted to follow up on some council requests that I've made and then some follow-up that I've asked for in regards to the responses, just to kind of keep this group aware of what's been asked for, as the mayor has requested that I do. So I did ask for a separate and new council request to be submitted as follow-up to Council Request 1084, which was to, that was for where the police department provided a sample audit of the flock data access. And I had some follow-up questions to that regarding whether the number of requests for that 1 month period is a normal amount of requests compared to comparable cities. So it seemed like a big number to me, and I just don't have a sense of whether that seems normal or not. So just wanting to get some clarification on that. I also asked who authorizes each request. Is it one person or multiple individuals? And is there a training provided to each of those authorized approvers? Next, I asked how many times has the Englewood Police Department denied data access requests in the last year? And lastly, I asked, is there a log of all requests that includes both status of approval, either approved or denied, and who the authorizing agent is? So that was a new request entered, but as follow-up to the original. Secondly, I wanted to, and sorry, I did not write down the council request number on this one, but I did enter a council request regarding the Avigilon encryption. And the answer to that request was long, but I felt relatively vague in nature. I contemplated entering some follow-up questions, but the answer did reference doing some additional work once the cybersecurity engineer is on board. But I did want to make the group aware that there are some typical levels of encryption, i.e. VPN or BitLocker type things in place for when data is in transit. But that data is not encrypted at rest. And so it sits on our servers in a server room here. I think that we might want to, at some point, have awareness as to who has access to that room. Like, does my badge as a city councilor member work for that room? Doesn't, okay. City manager is shaking his head no. I think it's a valid question to ask, given the fact that that data is sitting there and not encrypted. I know that that's part of the work that's being assessed moving forward. And then I guess just one last kind of comment or request is that when we're asking questions on items like this, if we cannot have responses that use words like meaningful protection, I don't know what that means. Be more specific and tell me what things mean versus kind of these words that feel very vague and I'm not really sure how to interpret it. I think that would help me have less follow-up questions and just, have us as a group be better prepared to have a more focused and productive conversation in May when we revisit the conversation. So thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you very much, Member Prang. Member Prang, you mentioned the cybersecurity hire. Do we have a timeline on when they're being hired? So, Sean, well, the reason why I ask is that you said that this is something that we should probably defer to the cybersecurity person. Not necessarily defer, but
well, if you read the answer to the council request, it does reference that there are needed improvements. I think there's some fairly significant gaps as far as our system that we have and what we actually own and are in charge of. So I don't have an idea on the timeline, but I do think hopefully it comes quick and hopefully it's on the top of the priority list for duties for that person.
Sounds good. All right. Thank you very much. All right. No one else for council member's choice Go ahead, Member Russell.
Thank you. I just have one, I believe, correction on the request I made on the one-on-one notes. I asked, I think the request was written that I wanted the average amount that we paid for right-of-way acquisition on the East Dartmouth traffic calming. I really asked for specific, exactly how much we paid each person for the right-of-way acquisition.
Thank you very much, Member
Thank you.
Russell. Member Bethel?
If the city manager would like, I can answer that question right now, as I have the information in front of me. Give me just a moment to pull up that email. But I had that right-of-way acquisition come through my mailbox just the other day. So I believe it was a $500 minimum, and this is for a temporary construction easement. Okay, so it is bit of a equation here, but it's a $500 minimum or $52.50 per square foot times 10% multiplied by half a year, by 6 months. So you're going to take your total square feet multiplied by 52.5 times 10% times 1/2, and that'll give you your equation for your total cost.
I appreciate that, but still, can I get what every address was paid? Right. I appreciate that, Councilmember Bethel. So there is an equation to figure it out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. Thank you both. All right. To you, Sean, for City Manager's report.
That is good information for me also. Thank you, Member Bethel. We will enter that one. Also, we can enter the who has access, but it is only IT staff as well as myself and Tim Dodd. But if we can go ahead and put that in. Okay. But I did verify that just now. I also just wanted to let everyone know that we have hired our cybersecurity engineer. So he came on board last week, and we will introduce him. He's already been identifying only one gap in all of our platforms for the Axios data breach that occurred. I'm not sure if I'm using the right terms there, but some of you may know there was a international data issue. One of our platforms was affected, but in a controlled environment that we've already verified was not affected. So he's already doing great work keeping us safe from the cyber. But as Member Prang mentioned, there are many gaps and many priorities for him now and moving on into the future. Also wanted to just let everybody know that the block party trailer as well as the movie kit reservations are open now, start April 15th. So they will be starting in a couple of days, and those book up fast. So if you are interested in getting the block party trailer or the backyard movie kit, please do that. Also just wanted to let you know, this is a little higher profile than some, but the lead reduction program has begun along Hamden and Bellevue starting today. Actually, work is taking place in phases with lane closures moving west to east along both of those corridors. So just be aware there will be some construction in those areas that are higher traffic volumes streets in our city. Also, the board and commission applications are now open through May 20th. So we have a number of vacancies on boards and commissions. So encourage everyone to apply for any of those vacancies. You'll be able to do that through May 20th. And I think that's all I've got, Mayor.
All right. Thank you very much, Sean. Any questions for Sean? All right. With that, everyone, this meeting is adjourned. We'll see you next Monday night. Everyone have a great evening. Take care.